This is Pastor Chris, and just like I did a few weeks ago when we were in the part of Ephesians which talked about God's structure for Christian marriages with loving submission of wives and loving headship from husbands, we move now into the first 4 verses of chapter 6, where Paul continues on and talks about more of God's structure, and this time through the relationship between parents and children. So just like last time when I interviewed my wife to get a voice from the other side of things, I thought it would be good to spend a little bit of time with my, I want to say children, but they're actually full-grown adults now. But it wasn't very long ago that they were under our roof and being parented by us. So I thought they might be able to offer some perspectives from that standpoint of things. So I want to introduce my son, Jordan Quimby. And he's currently at the University of Maine. He's in his last semester of chemical engineering. And then he's going to go work in Michigan after that, if all the state government says that he can do it because of COVID-19. Anyway, so Jordan Quimby, and he's 22, right? I got that right.
I think so.
And he's too young to not know his age. And then my daughter, Emma, who lives in Pennsylvania. She's married. She used to be Emma Quimby. Now she's Emma Friesen. And she's living down in Pennsylvania after meeting a fine young man at Lancaster Bible College. And he works at Target. And after recently losing her job because of working on a college campus, she's just found another job at working at Starbucks. She's a barista. So I have 3 questions, and we'll try to make this efficient, but I always say that, and I never am. But 3 questions, and I've already told them that they can be honest. This isn't an opportunity for everybody to talk about like how we're the greatest parents, because we're not, or that they're the greatest kids, because, I mean, they're right up there, but that's just my jaded opinion, my subjective opinion. So the first question I have is this. I'll read it verbatim.
Can I interrupt?
Oh, you know what? My wife, Heather, too. She's here, but everybody knows her anyway. Yes, interrupt.
Can you tell me the scripture that you're pulling this from so I can have it open?
Yeah, it's the last chapter of Ephesians, chapter 6, first 4 verses.
Thanks.
And that's good for everybody else here to be reminded of, too. Ephesians 6, verses 1 through 4. So question 1 is, the passage, Ephesians 6, 1 through 4, attaches a promise to the instruction. I actually should have my Bible open here too. Emma, actually, do you have it?
Yeah.
Can you read it for us, all 4 verses?
Yeah. Ephesians 6, 1 through 4. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord.
Thanks. So this passage, as you just heard, attaches a promise to the instruction. The instruction is for children to obey their parents in the Lord. And a promise that's attached to it is that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. So the question is, why, and I'm asking Jordan and Emma this, why do you think that obedience to Christian parents would lead to such things as are promised in here, like that things might go well with you and that you might live long?
I'll let Jordan start because I think I'll have more to say.
Okay. Well, now I want to talk a long time. I think my quick answer to the question that was directly asked in that is, I mean, if you let me restate it to make sure I'm thinking you're saying that what you are. You asked, why can a child expect to have a long life, prosperous life? Well, I don't think it used the word prosperous, but it may go well with you and you may enjoy long life on the earth if they honor parents who raise them godly, right? That's the question you're asking. Why do they get that?
And obey more than honor, but you can honor them by obeying.
Honor. Okay, yeah. Well, I think if you have parents that are doing that are raising you, as God would, in the will of God, and seeking out the wisdom of God, and not raising their kids in the way they think they should, or the way they think God would want them to, but the way God wants them to, by seeking out God the whole time. I think that, it's basically like God equals parents equals kids. You have, through them, God raising the kids in a way. I don't know if that sounds weird, but
Parents
ideally
are
that would
the
be the case, right?
conduit.
If you're taking your directives from God and you're acting out those directives, then your children are being raised by God. So I think basically, it's going well with you and you may live long, is because God's raising you in a way through your parents.
So then you're operating on the assumption that if any of us of any age, are to follow God, then that should increase the probability that things would go well with us, and that it would lead to long life.
No,
It sounds like what you
because it
are
doesn't.
saying.
Yeah. Well, here's something that could counter that is, have you or I or anyone ever perfectly honored their parents? So it could be that this is a perfect condition promise, and every time the condition is met, the promise is reached. But have we ever seen an example where this condition has been perfectly met besides Jesus Christ? And so I'm not using that as my argument against that. I'm just saying that's something that should be considered and could be considered,
Side
as
note,
to why
Jesus'
you don't
life
necessarily
is
always
short.
see this. Yeah, Jesus's life was short. Um, but you could argue it says Jesus's life, so it may go well with you, and you may enjoy a long life on the earth. And yeah, he died, but he still had life on the earth because he rose again 3 days later and was on the earth for a while. So you could argue that he had a long life on the earth,
I
although
have
he
things I
left
can
it. I
say,
don't
but
know.
I want to hear what you guys have to say. Emma, thank you, Jordan. Emma, what did you have to say about it?
Honestly, I did struggle with that question a little bit. Kind of like I think the same thing, like what you caught Jordan in asking him the follow-up question, because I was like, this seems weird, because it seems different than what you hear from Jesus about people who follow him, where there's a lot of if things are going well, usually that should show you more that there's an issue with how you're following the Lord than be like a confirmation that you're doing it right. So I still don't really have a good answer for that, because I didn't really take the time to get into it that much, and I was hoping you would just tell me, to be honest, what you found out.
Well, I'd be happy to do that.
But I did put a couple other things down. I don't know if this is actually, when you study it, what you'd come up with after looking into it, but go well, I don't know what kind of words that's coming from in the original translation, but maybe going well. When you talk about going well to different people, that's vastly different to whoever you're talking to. And so if we're reading this as Christians, then going well might not be like the American dream or something, but more along the lines of going well as in you can have the fruits of the Spirit, you have love, joy, peace, contentment, all that stuff flowing out of you regardless of what's happening. But it's still an issue when you get to the long life, because that still doesn't fit with the whole, well, we're getting around it that way thing.
I think it's, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think it's useful for me to go back to, we did a quick sermon series on Proverbs, and there's a distinction between Proverbs and promises. And Proverbs would be such if you eat right and exercise, you're going to feel better and live longer and be healthier. But, people could still get hit by a truck or get COVID-19 or whatever. But the principle stands. I think one thing that's easy to get tripped up on is when Paul says it's the first commandment with a promise. And we've taken that word seriously in the house with you guys growing up. Promise. If I go back to Exodus 20 with the 10 commandments, it actually says, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. I think it's easy to overthink this stuff. I think it's the plain reading of it is just that it's going to go, if you want what's good for you, if you know what's good for you, you will obey your parents if they want what's good for And there'll always be all kinds of exceptions, but your parents aren't asking things of you that should not lead to fruitfulness in your life.
Right.
In most cases.
Heather, do you have anything you wanted to add to this?
Well, actually, I do have a thought. You were talking about the Ten Commandments, and they were given to the Israelites as a nation, and that was supposed to help them to know how to dwell in the promised land. I don't know if that applies to daily Christians. If you honor your mother and father, that you will live long. I think that was, I mean, obviously God wants children to honor their parents, whether you're adults honoring your adult parents or your kids. But
Well, he does say it again in Ephesians, though, which is the one that we're discussing, which would have been far after
which is
that.
about obedience, though, right? Not necessarily honor.
Well, it does say honor.
No, he says honor,
Yeah.
and then he says it's the first commandment with a promise. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, Heather,
Yeah, true.
Heather, one of the commentators did actually bring up that point that you just brought up.
Hey. I did put down also, if I can interject, that, I mean, just two little things, not little, but back then, I know a lot of the laws that they went over that were like, had to do with rituals, with what you eat and washing and all this stuff. They didn't have the medical science and whatnot to know that that was actually going to keep them safe and healthy. So if their parents are raising them to follow these laws because they're abiding by what God has given them to abide by, then that would literally prolong their life, you know, if they're not eating things that can get them sick and stuff like that. And if they're washing their hands more regularly, maybe if we did that, we wouldn't have coronavirus.
I think,
just one other thing, and then I'll be done with this question. But, and then, I mean, if you're following your parents and you're following God, it just made me think they're following God, like what Jordan was saying. It kept making me think of, I'm bad at Bible names, but Peter or Paul maybe? I don't know. Whichever one said, like, follow me as I follow Christ is basically, yeah, you're following the example of Christ himself if your parents are doing that. But, you know, a kid can't just get that from his brain. He needs to have that example. And, I mean, just in general, even today, if we are talking the American dream type thing for this interpretation, I mean, if you are patient and humble and you know who you are in Christ, so you're confident and all these different things, it will serve you well in whatever station of life you're in, and people will respect you and things generally go well when you exhibit those types of behaviors. So,
yeah,
or at least better.
You're right. Yeah, better than they would if you didn't.
Right.
One thing to think about regarding this verse too is I feel like the problem with this verse, and you know, I careful to use the word problem, but the thing we like reach is there are two things that we kind of don't always see, and that's our first reaction is like that it might go well with you and you might have long life. So in regards to the long life, one thing that might be important to ask is what is a long life? Because I believe in the beginning of the Bible times, a long life was hundreds of years. Whereas maybe 400 years ago, a long life was maybe 60 years. And now a long life is maybe 90 to 100 years. And so what is a long life? Is it just a relative, whatever's along for your current culture or a healthcare system that's in place? So it might just be that long life is making a statement, not necessarily guaranteeing you a long life in the standards of whatever time frame you're in history.
79 years is.
Okay, good job, Heather. Give or take a month. Jordan, this won't be the first time I give examples from my own family, but I remember discussions that we've had when we were at odds about certain things when you're in your teens, and I don't know if you remember me saying it, but I would say, I'm trying to advocate on behalf of 30-year-old Jordan or 50-year-old or 70-year-old
Saying it every
Jordan.
other day.
Well, okay. Burn. But that's what that and that, but not to make that just all about between me and Jordan or parents and kids, but that's something I have to remind myself that God wants me to have an abundant life. And I have to think about the long view for the decisions that I make rather than just what I want right now. Because usually that's equals sin, is like, what do I want right now? What's good for me, makes me feel good in the moment without this long view. So what I would have wanted in those situations from my kids is to say, would you just trust what I'm telling you, because it's based on some sort of an understanding of experience or wisdom that would serve you well longer in your life. But I also know what it's like to be in my teens, and I don't care. I can't imagine that I'm ever going to be 30 or 50. I just want to enjoy my right now. Like, we all go through that. I get it. But that makes me think of it like, I want your life to be long, and I want things to go well for you, not just right now. And that's what God wants for us. We can move on to the next question unless I'm cutting anybody off. Okay. So the next question was, based on your experience being raised by parents, that would be us, and your observations of other families as well, hopefully not on sitcoms, because that's not really hyper realistic. What elements of parenting do you think, neither of my kids have kids, I should say that. Heather and I have no grandchildren. People don't necessarily know that. So all of my kids' perspective is, not based on them raising their own kids yet. But
sorry.
What?
I'm not.
What elements? I can hold other people's babies. What elements of parenting do you think you would bring into raising a child in the nurture and admonition of the Lord? And I get that from verse 4, where it says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but instead bring them up in the discipline and instruction or nurture and admonition of the Lord." What I was getting at with this question was, I don't want to come at this trying to put off a vibe that I think we had the perfect family, or that you guys turned out perfectly, or that we were perfect parents. But if there's anything from your own experience that you thought, hey, now that I look in hindsight, I find that was useful in their intention to bring me up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, or if there's some things we failed at in that regard as your parents, you don't have to say that, but if you have a lot of friends, what did their parents do or not do that you feel like helped them bring their kids up that way? So is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can go if it gives Jordan time to think.
Yeah, please go, because I'm not. Yeah, you can take this question.
Well, in terms of specific examples from our childhood that I can think of, whenever I was scared at night, I remember Mom would always pray for me, because I used to all the time when I was a toddler wake them up and be like, I had a nightmare, or I can't sleep, or make something up because I was bored or something. And she, sometimes I would sleep on the floor beside their bed or something. And there were various different tactics I think that she used to get me to go away. But I do remember, I never felt like I was unloved, and a big thing, I don't know how much this actually affected me, but I think because she would always put me back in bed and rub my back or something, and she would pray with me that God would help me to feel better and fall asleep, and that he would take the fear away and everything. And I mean, I don't know how much it actually affected me, but I still do, of course, when I'm afraid, I pray, whether it's a nightmare or an actual fear that is something that's a big deal that is coming in life. So that was just a good example from a really young age. And it helped me realize that I could, there was something out there to make me not fear, not just me laying in bed, and if Mom wasn't there, I was alone type thing. So that's just a specific example that comes to mind. I don't like answering this question that much, because I feel like it's really annoying when people who don't have kids say how they would raise kids. And so I don't want to be.
But are you at the point, you just gave an example there of one element of how you were raised, and I really want you to talk about what your perspective is from having received parenting rather than giving advice on how to give parenting.
Okay, so yeah, I did put down that, and then another big thing that you were both good at that I think Dad had to use more often, or maybe used more often, was just asking for our forgiveness, which I think is pretty unique when it comes to parenting. I think especially if you're not in a Christian household, hopefully it's not unique if you are in a Christian household, which kind of has to do with your next question too. But to ask for forgiveness when you messed up from your kids. I know I hear a lot of people, I mean, you specifically, Dad, how you say that when you were young, you just thought your parents were perfect and you looked at them like they couldn't do anything wrong because they're your mom and your dad, and that's who they are. And then you grow up and realize that they aren't, because they're human beings. And I know as a kid, obviously you have that immense love, and I had that for you guys, but I don't remember ever thinking that you guys were perfect. And I think maybe that's because you messed up a lot. I don't know. But I think a big part of that is that you guys were really honest with us. And I did put that down here too. Like when you were struggling with things, even when it came to struggling with parenting us, I think it was really good for me to hear, even especially as I grew older and was a teenager. And you have that tendency when you're like a teenager. And I was like, get off my back. Like, let me live my life. Do you even know what you're doing? And to feel like you're annoyed because your parents are telling you to do all this crap that doesn't make sense to you, but to have them sit across from you and say, yeah, this doesn't make sense to me and I don't know what to do, it makes you more on the same team in a way. Yeah. And just showed more that you guys loved and cared about us, and not that you were just trying to be tyrants and we had to listen to what you said because you knew it was right. And I think that makes a big difference.
Okay.
Can I actually comment?
Yeah.
This is not necessarily a reflection of how we brought you guys up so much, but it's kind of like if I was answering this question on behalf of how I was raised. My mom is a strong Christian. My dad is a good man who I believe now is a Christian, but I'm not sure what his status was while I was growing up in the house.
Yep. And this is going online, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mom really was the one who did a lot of our child raising in our house. And one of the things that stood out to me when I think back about our parenting, one of those things, there's two things that really stand out. Number one, I really wanted to be able to talk more with my mom and my dad, but I didn't know how. They weren't communicators. And so that has influenced how we brought, or I anyway, have tried to bring up you two. We always wanted you guys to be able to talk to us. And Chris is a big communicator, and he was right on board with that too. And I feel like we were pretty good at keeping that wide open for whatever question might come along, however embarrassing it might be, or whatever it was. We wanted to be able to make sure that was open for you guys. The other thing, when I think back about my mom, I always remembered her Bible wide open. And I just have pictures of her studying the Bible all the time. And that has comforted me as an adult, being a parent, knowing that my mom prays for me. And she might not understand what I'm going through, but she'll pray for me. That's a big deal. And comfort to know that you have somebody who is willing to pray. And if I had something that I needed advice for, I knew it was going to come, as far as she was concerned, it was going to come as best as it could from somebody who was well studied in the Bible. And that matters too.
Thank you, hon.
You're welcome.
Jordan, did you have anything?
I have no significant comment.
Well, I'll ask you a specific question then, because, and I think you wouldn't mind talking about this. One of the reasons we chose to homeschool you guys, one of them, was that we wanted to try to give you a better shot socially, which sounds ironic, and not have you be like peer dependent and just be like grow up and absorb all of the likes and bondages and everything of all the kids around you guys. That was just one of the reasons. But I know that correct me if I'm wrong. I got the impression that in hindsight, there are some things that like, I don't know if you wish that you weren't homeschooled, or do you think that was
I
useful
can, no, I
to
can
you
talk to
in
that.
some good way, or any thoughts that you have about that?
I think homeschooling was good. It taught me motivation. I mean, homeschooling was nice because you finished school pretty fast, especially in high school. I finished it
You
pretty
did.
fast.
Holy mackerel, yes.
Yeah, I finished it. Yeah, I did. And
Great.
funny enough, actually, now that I'm doing online classes through University of Maine, it's a lot like homeschooling again.
Yeah.
So
He's
I
a
do see a lot of
homeschooler right now.
similarities. Yeah, and I kick butt at it because I've been doing it. It's like this is my zone. This is what I like. And I do think staying out of public school did develop some independence, and I didn't really have any trouble making friendships because I still was involved in the community. So I mean, what I tell everyone is, eh, personally, for me, this is gonna be different between everyone, but me and my roommate was actually homeschooled too, and we both think that homeschooling is good for about elementary school, and then somewhere around middle school, or freshman year, we would have, if we could go back, have switched into a public school scenario, just to have more of the things available, like regular sports. And I know regular sports are available when you're homeschooling, but regular sports are intimidating when you're a homeschooler.
Mm.
um, so I do recommend going to high school just for just the extracurricular aspect. You'd have more opportunities to the band. You're more comfortable because you actually have a friend group when you go to the school. You could take AP classes and such like that. That would have put me ahead a bit more in college. So there are hindsight things. Am I bitter about it? No. Am I upset about it? No. Did it set me back? No, not really. So like it's not anything major. That's the way I would have done it. I do think it also, I mean, you guys said a big reason you guys chose to do homeschooling is because it fostered independence and we didn't just become one of the crowd. And that worked. We're both very independent people and
That's not
very
true.
stubborn people. Yeah, and so I think actually it worked so well that I got almost too independent, and too self-sufficient. And now that's something I've recently had to recognize and learn to open myself up to others and accept help and realize I can't do everything on my own, even if some days I can, but I can't always. I can't a lot of the time. And it's hard even if you do. So like why wouldn't you just open up and let some other people in? So I've had to learn to be less independent actually recently. um, is that a good problem? Is it a bad problem? I don't know. Are you never not going to have any problems? No. It's just a problem. It's one of the problems I face. Um,
Well,
so
can I?
I think it's just an interesting. I think it's gonna be different for everyone. That's just me.
One of my, as far as independence, like especially under, having this discussion in the context of the scripture, where my responsibility before God is to bring you guys up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord and all that.
Hmm.
There's the like the personality of independence and your behavior that way. But do you feel like, and again, we could get way deep in the weeds with this. What I want to ask you is, do you think you would have been a worse person, basically, what I'm dancing around, if you had been in public school from the time you were in middle school? But the thing is, I say that with the caveat that it's, it's really easy for people to just like fake it, kind of like, and act a certain way and say the right things, but have their heart be in a different place, even though they're being homeschooled and going to church all the time. Maybe you're not much, maybe anybody's not as different as they would seem if they were going to middle school and just letting it all come out because that was the culture in the secular school that they went to. So like my question
Um,
is, do you feel like it gave you a better shot to not get sucked into a crowd of vanity and sin?
I think it depends on a better shot at what. Spiritually, maybe. Um, I can't answer. I mean, it's interesting. I think you mentioned one term in there too. Would you be better or worse if you did that? And I don't think I would be better or worse. I think I would just be a different person. And I can't really tell you necessarily who that would be or what he would look like because I didn't do it. So I can't
Right.
foresee all those things. My gut reaction is I would have had more immediately available, easy access scholastic opportunities in the course of AP courses, and other such programs like that, which might have made freshman year of college a little easier. Spiritually, I have no idea. I think a similar thing happened when I went to public school as when I would have gone to public school if I was in middle school. Because I think when you're a kid, at least I think a lot of people, including me, I was just a Christian because that's what I had always been. I was really good at it, so why not stick with it? And so I think everyone has a time where they like actually take it for themselves. And so I
And
think
just to be clear,
regardless
just
of
to
whether I went
interrupt
to
real
public
quick,
school,
hey, just real quick, because not everybody knows this. You were homeschooled through your 11th grade year, and then we had you go to Mount View Public School for that last year. Okay, but
yes,
continue. I just
yeah,
wanted to mention.
yeah. And so everyone
And
knows
I
what I
did
mean.
that
I think
because I felt like we were ripping you off socially a little bit, that you couldn't be a part of some of those things, school spirit and stuff.
your video and audio is a little out of sync, so I'm not quite exactly sure how to interpret what you just said.
Just carry on.
Okay. Short answer is I think my story is maybe valuable to consider, but I think everyone's so independent and so different. It's very different. Emma and I are so different. If Emma went to public school, the pluses and benefits would have been entirely different for her than
Yep.
for me. And so you got to think about the personality. You got to think about your kid. You got to think about this. So I can't give you an answer. I can only give you a story, and what you do with that story is up to you.
I have a theory that, because we're pretty close, I think, relatively close as a family. Like, we still talk and joke around online each day. I think we all still really I know we all still love each other, and we still like each other. And I wonder if, like, you guys weren't home as much with your mom being homeschooled and with each other, if we would have those tight bonds as we do. I think it's really easy to take a lot of that for granted, and because you said you don't have a control to compare it to.
I think for sure Jordan and I are way closer than we otherwise would be. I mean, even his senior year of high school when he was at public school, I think it was definitely a difference, because it was like all of a sudden there was all these opportunities open to him that hadn't been there, so he wanted to take a hold of all of them. Plus, I was busy doing my own things too. Yeah, even that year, I don't think we really had much, probably the least relationship we've had, even including now when we're states apart. So I think our family probably would be more separate.
I mean, I think that's natural. I mean, Emma would have her girlfriends and I would have had my guy friends. And I don't think that's wrong. You know, is it great? It's great that Emma and I had the relationship we do, and we're as close as we are to you and mom. But I wouldn't homeschool just to enhance your family relationship. And I think some families, it wouldn't have that effect. I think it did on ours. Some families, it might not be good for them, you know?
Maybe
it's good to think about. It really forces people to sit down and say, like, well, if it is a bag of competing benefits and things you sacrifice, which things are you benefiting from? And are those things that are worth putting all your eggs in that basket for? If you have family, academics, extracurricular activities and stuff, like, which things last for an eternity? Which things make you a better person in the truest word of what better is, and not just popular or athletic. And I'm not trying to, well, I am trying to squeeze people to think about it a certain way, because there are some things that are more important eternally than things are. But like you said, there can be people who are incredible parents who have kids who would be deemed to be a disaster. And there are disastrous parents that have kids that grow up to be very commendable and fruitful people. And it's not a perfect science. So, okay, I can move on to the third question if nobody else has anything on that. I'm trying to be mindful of the time.
Just to provide a super quick alternate view. I mean, Jordan mentioned that he and I are very different and things would have gone differently. I never went to public school. You guys gave me the option in my senior year. I did not want to at all. I ended up building quite a life for myself that just didn't involve anyone who was in the public school system. So I would have just been foregoing all the things that I had going for me and everything I had invested my time in. Because I worked with horses all through high school, got to have like a full-time job, make a lot of money, and earned a lot of not earned, but gained a lot of knowledge and friendships and relationships and contacts that got me new opportunities when I did graduate from being homeschooled. Plus, I had a lot more time to do all that because I could do my schoolwork, you know, like, hey, I have a weekend thing so that I can go do this. I'm going to do my schoolwork on, or like, it's going to take up Friday. I'll do my schoolwork Sunday, something like that. Or like, hey, it's nice out. I'm going to do my schoolwork tonight. What?
I said, and then you never ended up doing it at all.
Yeah, and then I just graduated, so that's what you should do.
What was it you said at your graduation? I think mom said, like, aren't you excited or aren't you proud? You just accomplished something. And then do you remember what you said?
No,
You said,
but it was
I don't
probably
look at
funny.
it as accomplishment. I look at it at the end as the end of a failure. Something like
That
that.
sounds nice. Yeah, sure.
That was a funny line.
Basically, I wanted school to take up the smallest part of my life that it possibly could. So going to public school is devoting a lot more of your time to things like that. And it was just something to get out of the way for me.
Yeah, and that's, I don't say that as any sort of a knock on Heather as the teacher. Heather was the one that educated them. But it was just that.
She deserves way more credit than I do.
No, but Emma was a very difficult student. She didn't fit well under that academic structure. That's what that is.
So if we're talking that scholastics were important, and if it's most important for you that your kid has a good, like I think I might have learned better and actually learned more in high school if I had been in public school, because when I went to college and sat in a classroom for the first time in my life and listened to a teacher speak, I did super well. And so if that was important to me, maybe I would regret my high school experience based on that. But it's really not that important to me because I think everything went exactly how it should have gone. But
yeah.
Sorry. Go on.
No, that's fine. Question number 3. Heather, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, thanks.
Okay. Number 3, and this is the last question. So earlier in chapter 5, so in church we've been going through the book of Ephesians, and so it's good to remember that none of these things are standalone thoughts. They're all part of a letter. And just like we wouldn't want to be taken out of context in the things that we say, we shouldn't take Paul out of context either. So he's saying this within a longer narrative, that one of the preceding thoughts is from chapter 5 when he says, you should give thanks always and for everything to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. So Paul's saying that each Christian should have an attitude of preferring the other rather than themselves. Okay, so bookmark that. Then Paul went in and talked about the structure of marriages and the order within marriages. And then he went on now to talk about the structure of parents and children. And so that's useful to have. So I say earlier in chapter 5, Paul says that all believers, that we need to be subject to one another or submit to one another. So given that, do you ever think there are times when a Christian parent should submit themselves to a child? So, and just one more quick thing, clarification for that is, like, there are 2 different views of marriage, probably more than 2, but complementarianism and egalitarianism, where in egalitarianism, there's more of a structure of, well, the wife should submit to the husband, but the husband should also submit to the wife and have that attitude like all Christians should have among each other. Do you think there's ever a time, Jordan and Emma, when a parent should have an attitude of submitting themselves to a child in one form or fashion?
Do you want me to go?
Short answer is no. I mean, honestly, I think parents strive to understand and care for and look out for the needs of their children. But I think a lot of times, and I might be taking myself into a big hole by saying this, where we just talked about women submitting to their husbands, but at least I guess I'm just thinking about this more of in a business or hierarchical sense. Is a lot of times submission is based upon who has the most experience. And so I guess that's the thought process I apply to this question. And so, no, I think in most cases, your parents would have more experience than your children would. So I think your children should submit to the parents, not the parents to the children. Now, again, that goes with the parents trying to care for their children as best they can, understand them, and listen to their children. But I don't think listening, understanding, caring for is submission. I think they're different ideas.
Okay. Thank you.
I
Now, I'm open to be proven wrong. I just can't think of a scenario.
No,
right now.
I wrote down 3 little points. I can try to flesh them out a little bit. I think I ended up looking up the verse and let me see. It says, maybe I looked up a different verse for that. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling. But I mean, obviously you should, like that verse says, your child is a person. The one another applies to your child. And I think, at least I've seen in like our relationship as a family, and in other families' relationships in general, it's pretty common for parents to just be really, really hard on their children. And like you get that typical, the parent sees their child as their younger self and they want their child to be better than they were. And so there's just such a high level of expectation. I know it's been harder with you and Jordan in your relationship. I hope it's okay if I say this. You open guy. Like that father-son thing, and where you just have such a high bar and there's such an expectation there, and maybe you just naturally don't have the same grace for him as you have for me because I'm a cute little girl. And yeah, so I think that's just one place where it can be applied. If you find yourself speaking to your child in a way that you would be embarrassed if someone else were there listening, I mean, I think that's just kind of a little example about you kind of disrespecting who they are as a person, because they're a person. They're not just your property and your ability to treat however you want. And like, you're responsible to God for how you speak with them. And so I think that's just one thing. Not that obviously the relationship is so different that you can't say that you should talk to them like you talk to everyone else, because that's just not right. But to stop yourself maybe when things get out of hand and think, this is a person that God made in his image, and he's got things in him that I don't have in me, that God gave him or her, that can show me more about who God is, whether your kid's great or horrible or whatever. And yeah, just my second point is that you can learn from your kids, which is what I was just saying. Basically, they're different than you. And I think you can learn a lot from your kids. If you teach them right and if you raise them well, then you should be able to learn a ton from them, because they will be independent and they'll be able to learn things without you and through you. And if they are honoring you and obeying you as you obey Christ, then Christ will show them things that he didn't show you, and absolutely you should be open to hearing that. And then my third point was, just in what I mentioned earlier about apologizing to your kids. I think usually you don't see that a lot from, like Jordan was saying, in like a business sort of view. Like, you don't get a lot of bosses apologizing to their lower people and stuff, but I do think that is,
I think they should interject.
Yeah, they gain a lot of respect that way. And it's like every time when you make yourself vulnerable like that, I think you feel like, oh no, I'm giving somebody else the upper hand. But you really are, because you're humbling yourself underneath them and you're giving them the power. But if you need to apologize, then you're basically acknowledging that you've kind of taken something from them, and that's the right response to it. So it was just a thought that I had, because people can apply that submit to one another to marriages to some degree. And of course, like, even though I'm responsible, Mom and I said in our video, we agree we would say our stated theology is we believe that I should be the head of that Jesus is the head of our house, but basically I'm the physical head of this house, and that Mom should lovingly submit. But when we talk about how that all works out, we're both learning and growing in all of that. And there are plenty of occasions where, like every day, where we submit to each other. Even though that's not the way we overall understand the structure should be. but it's just within the, within our Christian lives, that's the way we should prefer and love each other. But then that's what made me think about with parenting. Are there ever occasions when I should submit to my kids? And so the apologies, I think, is one way. Or, as you guys were, Jordan, you and I have had discussions about video games, and I hate video games, and I'm not saying they're morally bad, but I just hate them. And we've had discussions like, I said, why don't you do stuff with your friends rather than playing games with them? And you asked me these questions I didn't know the answer to, like, what's the difference if, like, my friend's sitting in my room here playing a game with me, or he's online? I'm like, I don't know. That's really hard. It just seems wrong. And I have to be open to really not just say, just because I said so and it's stupid and that's not the way I grew up. Much like older generation Christian parents have said to me, like, I didn't like that old Christian rock because it had the guitars and it had the drums, but they really couldn't morally think of anything wrong with it. They had to submit their understanding to try to learn something from their kids, like you said, Emma. Mm-hmm. And that's humbling hard for a parent to do, because you really feel like you're giving the upper hand to your kids and showing them that you just don't know.
Or you might feel like you're even handing them over to sin or handing them over to the devil. Like that's a very scary thing to do too.
Yeah, parenting's hard, but you still it's fine. Whatever, do whatever you want to do. I know. I'll say this. I keep joking with the kids, like, no, you wait till you're ready. Parenting's really hard. Give me some grandkids, and I go back and forth. They're always trashing me because of that.
I can get some grandkids if you parent them for me.
No.
We've had 2 practice runs.
In due time. Okay. Well, if anybody, Heather, I haven't given you much to say here, but mostly this was an interview of Jordan and Emma anyway. Did you want to say, like, that you love them or anything nice?
No. Oh.
Whoa.
Okay.
I did want to comment on the question, if it's all right.
Yeah.
I think parents submitting to children might happen more when they are older rather than when they're younger.
Yes.
And like when they go to the teenage stages, you got to pick your battles and decide what's worth your efforts and what isn't. Yeah. Because if everything is a battle, then you're just in for a lot of gray hair. Yeah. And you've got to be careful about your relationship and keeping those lines of communication open and that kind of thing. And helping them to trust you means that you've got to be willing to think about things and not just do that I told you so kind of thing. Yeah. And so when they're really little, there's not really a time when you submit to your kids. Right. But when they're teenagers and into adults, then there are times when you need to submit to your kids. And I think also, and this might be me just not really knowing it, not really knowing what I'm saying, but I have older friends whose parents are aged and they're going through situations where perhaps, their parent isn't supposed to be driving anymore, or they're trying to figure out with their siblings what to do when this aging parent needs to be in a nursing home rather than at home, but the parent doesn't want to go along with it. There are times like that where it's better for the parent to submit if they can. So that's another situation with adult children and their
right. And that's a good point. And I'm going to draw a distinction in the sermon when I talk about it too, because before, when Paul's talking about the design for Christian marriages, near the end of that portion, he says that, you should leave and cleave. You should leave your parents and cleave to your wife. So I think that these parental and child discussions are better left within the context of dependent children living under the roof of active parenting parents. But right.
But I didn't cleave to a wife yet. You still have to submit to me.
No, you're dependent. Well, because it also mentions in chapter.
I'm not a dependent.
Yeah, neither.
I filed as independent last year.
I'm married filing jointly.
God's desire for all of us, is like in chapter 4, is like until we had all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood. That's not that Emma should grow up and be a man, but to mature manhood to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, that we may no longer be children tossed to and fro by the wind. So God wants us all to grow up and mature, even if you're not married and within that next context of leaving and cleaving. He doesn't want us to hang behind and always, I shouldn't have to, you know this, I'm just saying, I shouldn't have to actively parent you anymore, like I did when you were under the roof, and you're happy with that, and I'm happy with that.
Bye, Jordan.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, my computer went dim. That happened in
All
the
right.
middle. Too.
I do love my
Thank you,
kids,
guys.
and we did the best we could in raising them. So, and I'm glad that God filled in where we messed up.
Word. Right.
I have more things written down, just like 2 or 3 little things, but I understand if you want to cut it off for time.
I am
That's up
very.
to Jordan. Yeah, Jordan needs to go get some
need to
food.
order some pizza. I'm sorry.
Wait, no, Jordan, why don't you leave and then Emma can share what she wants. That's fine.
No, I only want her talking when I'm here. I need
Oh
to
my
make sure
God.
she's not like lying.
Okay, well, go for it, Emma.
It's all about you, Jordan. Everything
No,
I'm going to say.
I'll talk to you guys later, okay? This was
Bye.
fun.
Love you.
I
Bye.
blew my hand.
Eat up. There he goes.
Okay, Emma.
Wow. I feel so loved. I just, in thinking of all this, wrote down some little thoughts that I had because I had them, and I can't ever stop talking. So, let me check. I already said, but one of the things that I wrote down was just showing kids your weaknesses, being willing to do that, I think has helped me a lot growing up. I think it helps me now that I'm older more than it did then, because I don't feel like I'm less than you guys were or something, because you're still very honest. Like, you guys don't know what we're doing. Nobody knows what they're doing. But I think there's a big tendency to assume that everyone else does. So growing up and like learning how to get car insurance and all this stuff is a lot to go through. And it's just nice to feel like I'm not worse at it than anyone else, especially because 2 people that I love and respect a lot have been willing to be honest with me about their struggles with it, even still. So I get to look forward to the fact that it will never end.
I like how you're very politically correct in saying, like, they're very honest with you, rather than my dad's a drama queen whenever I ask him a question about taxes or shopping for a car.
Yeah,
I don't
sure.
know.
I won't put that in there, but I think another thing, I know growing up with you guys, and I don't think it was really your fault. I think it was just more of a me thing, but I don't know how to change this when I become a parent with an older child. But I felt like I didn't really want to share a lot about what I was thinking about anything to do like spiritually, which I think had more to do with me being more closed off to emotions and more hard that way. So I didn't really want to show anyone that side of me, really, especially you guys, just because you're my parents, so that's the lot you got in life. Which has changed now, I think, now that God has done a lot in my heart and life. But it's so nice to have the connection with you guys on spiritual things. And I remember when that was kind of a new thing in my relationship with both of you, and it felt like just nice a sigh of relief, like a breath of fresh air, which it's silly that it wasn't that way the whole time, but that's how people work. So I'm not sure exactly what, but I know when I raised kids, and I don't think it was really anything specific that you guys did wrong. I think it had more to do with who I was and, whatever. We could get into the psychology of everything. But I do want to make sure that when I raise kids eventually, that I'm talking to them about what's happening in my life, not just talking like what God's doing in my life and what he's teaching me. Just like I would talk to someone that I had over for dinner from church or something, to have those same types of discussions with my kids and say, like, this is what God is doing in my heart and life. Because I don't know if that would open that channel up more rather than just having them nod and stuff. But, just to have that conversation be more cultivated more often.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
It's always easy to, like, Monday morning quarterback, hindsight 2020 stuff. But people develop at different times and in different ways, and it's really hard to predict when and if they ever will in certain ways. But this is me patting us on the back a little bit as parents, because some of the decisions you make as a parent aren't necessarily actively instructing and admonishing your kids, but it's also making decisions to put them in places where they can be more fruitful and where they're in an environment where some of those things might be cultivated. Now, making the decision to have you pursue, first it was going to be Word of Life, but what ended up being One Life, and of course you took an active step in investigating that, was recognizing that you're kind of a non-traditional learner, and that we wanted to put you in an environment where they would increase the probability that people around you who loved your soul would care for you in that way, and that you could be more into, like, some experience learning and figuring out what you wanted to do. And it was within that environment that God worked. And who knows if he would have sooner, if you were in that environment sooner, we can't know. But that's a parenting decision to point you in a certain direction where those things might be more cultivated as well.
Right. And just to put out there for the people listening who don't know, you guys didn't force me. They didn't force me to go to Christian education,
No.
But they gave both of us an option where that would be a really feasible, simple thing to do following high school. And I wouldn't have done it if it weren't for you guys' help. I just wouldn't have, because it wouldn't have been worth it to me to pay the money and take the risk. But having you guys being willing to take that risk when you didn't even have the money or anything like that, and trust that God wanted you to do that, changed my life, brought me a husband, all kinds of good stuff.
Well, and the interesting thing about that too is I was encouraged by listening to Tisha Larrabee talk about getting Caleb into Word of Life. And that was when I was thinking, like, well, if we really believe there's a God and we really believe this is a good thing, even though we don't have the money, we should put that offer out to the kids and trust that God would provide for it in a way that we can't predict.
Yeah.
So that's the value of having the church, and, like, parents who recognize they don't have everything figured out, being ministered to by learning how other parents are doing things too.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that I had written down that is just kind of general and not super specific to this passage or any of your questions, just because I was thinking about all of this. You can edit this out or whatever if you don't think it's worth it. But I think you guys did a very, very good job at allowing Jordan and I both to grow up and become adults and separate from you guys without feeling guilty about it. And I know I've just seen a lot of examples of where it seems the departure from childhood to growing up and adulthood just seems a lot more unhealthy and very strained and emotional in a lot of ways. And I know it is still very emotional for you guys to have to deal with that on your end, but I think you just have done a really good job preparing us to be adults and then letting us be adults and being there and being great parents from a distance and when we were close and all of that. So yeah, I just think over parenting, I just see some of my friends whose parents still seem to have all these rules for them and, like, just won't let them go. It just seems like they can't let go of being their parent. And some of my friends who are my age who just don't know how to do a lot of really important, simple things that are setting them back in life because of their parents' just inability to let go. So thanks, guys. And I just wanted to put that out there for any parent who's listening to this, maybe struggling with that. And then just like, oh, sorry, what?
That's encouraging. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. The last thing that I had written down is just that, I mean, being newly married for me, I'm listening to a lot of marriage podcasts and things. So they were going over, this will tie in, don't worry, just bear with me, it's not that long. They were going over in one of the podcasts by Timothy Keller, the power that a husband and wife have in marriage to, more than anyone else in the world, what they say about the other person to them really defines your self-image of who you are. Like mom and dad, if dad tells you you are beautiful and every other person in the world tells you you're ugly, you're going to feel beautiful. And if dad tells you you're ugly and everyone else in the world tells you you're beautiful, you're going to feel ugly.
You're not ugly, you're cute.
And that made a really big impact on me listening to that as a wife. But I think to apply that to parenting as well, I think so much of my self-image comes from how you guys, I'm going to get emotional just talking about it, like how much you guys have encouraged me and Jordan growing up, telling us who we are. And even still, like when I apply for jobs and stuff and you guys are like, they're stupid not to hire you. And when I think of the difference between that and kids whose parents have told them, even just in a show I was watching, a dad was telling his son, like, because they were robbers or something, like, no, son, this is who we are. We're not going to be people like that. Like, and that he was saying it in a negative way. Like, you can't rise up like that. We're always going to be like this and you can't get out of that. But having you guys tell us who we are in really good ways, both as like you're a Quimby type thing, kind of like hype, but then also like you're a child of Christ and like you are loved and all these different things. I think that makes a huge impact in your kids.
And that's great. That's encouraging. And just as a pastor or just a Christian, I'll say that's what God's doing throughout the Bible.
Yeah, exactly.
This is who you are. And that's what Paul has been doing, spending 3 chapters in Ephesians, saying, this is what God has done for you. This is your position. This is who you are. Therefore, walk in unity, walk in purity, walk carefully. So that's a good way to end this whole thing. So thank you, Emma. And thank you, Heather.
Thanks for listening to talk.
Love you guys.
Love you.
Bye-bye,
Bye-bye.
Emma. Love you.
Bye.